There is no interest on the part of three countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Israel, to have legitimate, democratic, open states that are functioning in the region.
I mean, 40% of India, 40% is young people under the age of 35. So, Modi cannot afford to not listen.
Hello, and welcome back to If We...
Let's do it again.
Okay, here we go again. Yeah, exactly.
Here we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to If You Were in Charge with me, Sanam Androlini.
Me, Kavita Nandini Ramdas.
So this is our last episode before a little bit of a break for the summer, and we're going to be kind of freewheeling a little bit. So bear with us. But the first piece of news that we're going to tap into is Kavita's new status as grandma. Oh my goodness. What does it feel like?
Nani Jan.
Okay. Nani Jan. What is it like to see your own child have a child?
It's wild. It's such an extraordinary experience. And, Sanam, I was just thinking, it's also very humbling, right? Because you see this tiny being and you remember you brought this tiny being into life. And now here's this huge, real grown-up, mature, extraordinarily competent woman. And she's brought new life into the world. And at the same time, I think the humbling part is that despite all the privilege that we have of our daughter living in the United States and the best possible healthcare that she has access to because she doesn't need to depend on any kind of non-existent state delivery services, I think it also reminded me, as someone who's worked on women's rights all my life, how this is still a perilous moment, that a woman, every time she brings a new life onto the planet, basically puts her own life at risk. And that's true whether you're Serena Williams or Mira Ahmed or Mira Ahmed Prilo or Sanam Andolini or Kavita Ramdas. That's so humbling. So I'm happy to report that all the results were fabulous. So along with the World Cup, it was the World Cup final when little Parker Qatari Prilo arrived. And we got to see Spain win.
That's amazing. Yeah. The pictures that you sent and of his little feet and the little toes and the nails, it reminded me when my kids were born, and I kept looking at them and thinking, what is this miracle that knows where to put which toe to get it right? I was looking at 20 toes and 20 fingers, whatever, I mean, everything was...
You were having double vision, so to speak.
Just this miracle of everything is so perfect. Everything inside is so perfect. I was having a conversation recently with a guy, and he was saying, men's lives go in a straight line. Your women's lives are cyclical. It's like every, menstrual cycle in a way. It's like it's life and death.
Yeah.
But it's to this point that on the point of life, you could be facing your most perilous moment, right? And it's just...
Yeah. And the fact that women do this
all the time,
all over the world, with the most minimal circumstances. Mira was asking Zuli to recount the story of how that's my husband, who was born in a small coal mining town. And the person who helped to deliver his mom was his 9-year-old sister, and the local village woman from the village who that was all they had available. And I also think about the fact that so many children in the poorest parts of the world, and particularly young girls, don't actually have the luxury of being children. They have to grow up so quickly to be able to help their younger siblings. But it's also kind of amazing to watch the process of this new life miraculously kind of coming in this perfect way.
Like the other thing that I found with my own kids, but also every time I see little babies, is that we do our work for them. Like everything that and it makes me cry just thinking about it. But it's like to think that this is the world that we're giving them. They deserve the best. They deserve a clean planet and
a safe one.
And a safe one. And all of them. And it just, but it is for them. And I just wish that more people and people in power would think about the babies that are born every day.
It's so fitting in a way that we're doing this reflection on our season, because I felt like Parker Qatari arriving, and Qatari is my maternal grandfather's middle name. So, it also made me think of cultures coming together. Here's this child of an Indian Pakistani union, our daughter Mira, who's married to this young man who's of Huguenot and Scottish and Irish and goodness knows what else descent, American. And here's their little baby coming into a world. And that's also the world we're hoping to create, right, Sanam? It's this world of a more peaceful, a world in which our humanity matters first, not what culture we're from, not what nationality we hold, not what passport defines us or what boundaries or borders define us. And so that was also a moment. And that's been so interesting too, right? Because then you watch all this amazing genetics take place, and
this blending and merging that you have and I have and our children have. It's always been.
It's always been. It's history. It's human history.
But the more complicated it gets, the more I sort of feel that they will rise above, and the world will rise above this moment of extreme kind of weaponization of identities and polarization that is going based on this idea of
ethnicity and faith, and yes.
And these children demonstrate that, of course, we're all the same, and pluralism is the way you would want to go. Obama used to call them he used to call himself, I think, the mutt or something like that. This idea that you're not purebred, but actually it's so it's very humbling and energizing and just lovely to see, and to be a grandma. I mean, I was thinking about my mother, who I think she was 63 when I had my kids.
That's exactly the same age I am.
Yeah, and how wonderful it is, because she had the energy to be there, and they've really grown up with her. So, yes, and it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful few decades going forward. Yeah, how lovely. I was scrolling through something, and all of a sudden I see this news that in India, the Gen Zs, which I love as my favorite generation, have mobilized. And it's like the medical students. And this idea that India has over 1 million medical students. They take this incredibly difficult test. Only 10,000 of them or something get through.
It's crazy, yeah.
And the others are thrown
by the wayside.
Right.
Without any guarantee of any kind of job. The head of our Supreme Court, he began this by saying, these young people who are complaining about not having jobs, they're no better than cockroaches. They're a plague on our society. We don't actually need them. That's how this began.
Cockroaches.
The head of our Supreme Court.
And then of course, because they are the generation that they are, and we love them for their humor, they flip that around and they become
a young man who is a Dalit, who is a member of India's untouchable caste, who is studying abroad at the time, picks this up and puts a little meme out and says, if we are the cockroaches, may we be millions of cockroaches together. And that goes viral.
It's amazing.
They call themselves, so instead of, it's the BJP, which is the Bharatiya Janata Party, which means India's People's Party, and they've called themselves the CJP, the Cockroach Janata Party, which is, we are the Cockroaches People's Party. And it's just, I mean, from B to C, it's like moving on.
It's and they're out there, and the education minister has resigned.
Has been forced to resign, which was one of their primary requests, and which has never happened in Narendra Modi's 10 years in power. He has never been forced, even in the middle of those amazing farmers' protests. The protests are trying to dismantle India's Citizenship Act for people who were of Muslim origin. In all of those protests, Narendra Modi never agreed to dismiss anybody from his cabinet. And here it goes, the education minister. So yes.
This feels like it should be the middle of the beginning, not, even though they probably want it to be the end of the end, right? Like they just want to sort of throw this one guy under the bus and carry on. But it doesn't feel, feel like it's going to be like that, right?
I think this is a wake-up call in the way that in some sense the young people protesting Gaza were for the United States, right? I mean, that too was Gen Z. That too were all these young people who had cut their teeth on protesting the murder of George Floyd and had been high school students then, and many of the students who showed up. And I think that in the same way, I mean, I was astounded to read an 8th grader told her parents that she was going to the protest. And the presence of young women, Sanam, in this has been quite extraordinary. Young Muslim women dressed in full hijab, holding placards saying, you send the police to lathi charge us. A lathi is the weapon that the British basically invented. It's a wooden rod with a steel tip on it. And the British had Indian forces use that against Indians who were protesting for independence. And now that's what the Modi government used against the students. And here's this young woman, a medical student, holding up a sign saying, you use lathis against us, but rapists in your government go scot-free, because there's so many men in Modi's government, like there are in Mr. Trump's government, who have been accused of sexual assault. And yeah, it just gave me such a sense of...
It's fascinating because you see the pattern. I mean, I was in India a few years ago, 2023. I was asked to speak about the women life freedom movement in Iran. And it was, it's young girls. It was school children who were cutting their hair. And and it's like, you can't fight this force. This is a river that's coming, and precisely because it's nonviolent, your violence becomes diminished, and it reflects back on you. It just...
Exactly. I mean, 40% of India, 40% is young people under the age of 35. So, Modi cannot afford to not listen. Is this a temporary victory? Of course. Is it a sign of, are the opposition parties going to really change or transform? We don't know. But much is in the same way as I think when people dismissed those students protesting on Gaza, they could not have known that 3 years later, which is where we stand right now, the majority of people in the United States no longer support the state of Israel. That is a transformation that one of our guests spoke about, Stephanie from Jewish Voices for Peace, and it's real.
Now we're seeing before the midterms that if you are supported by AIPAC, it's going to be a black mark against you for many of the politicians on the Republican and the Democratic side. And yet, AIPAC is one step ahead by going and getting this bill passed last week on the integration of military intelligence and technological development
between the United States and Israel.
And you're like, and so this is where I'm like, it is important to keep the eye on the ball. Like a lot of the times it's like you need the protest, but you need the strategy, you need the vision, you need to know what the other side, what games they're playing and what hardball they end up playing. And this particular one, I'm thinking, is it going to get passed in the Senate? Is it just performative? Is it because meanwhile there's another bill that's going through Congress this week, which is to cut $3 billion of funding to Israel. So I'm like, is this the same Congress? Is there schizophrenia?
But what is inspiring to me, Sanam, is that truly you and I are both people who came to the United States and spent a considerable amount of time here. You are now back in the UK. I still live in the US. I do think that I would have been blown away if someone had told me even 10 years ago or 7 years ago or 5 years ago even, that you would have two different kind of bills, so different, going through Congress at this exact moment. It is absolutely inconceivable that we would have had this other bill trying to cut aid to Israel, and that many senators and congresspeople would be actually committed to standing behind that.
It's weird to say brave enough, but it's basically it's reached that point where, because it used to be if you stand against it that you would be destroyed, and now
correct.
It's unclear where it goes. But very very like these forces of, I don't want to say dark and light, but there's a real,
and we've seen it in Iran also. I mean, I feel like this whole season we have been dealing with not just Gaza as a backdrop, but an assault on the Iranian people, on the Iranian civilization, as he called it, which indeed it is. We began early in January with people power on the streets that was horrendously crushed by the current regime in Iran. And then we watched sort of in absolute alarm and dismay as basically Israel tried to deflect attention from Gaza by persuading the United States to attack a country that has not sent weapons against the United States, has not bombed anything, has not destroyed anything in the United States. And so here we have this really interesting moment where we have people who were non-violently trying to change the government in their own country.
Now being bombed
by the people who claimed that they are wanting to
help them. But then the masks are off. I think this is the shift that many in the Iranian, whether diaspora or internally, have come to realize. Because for years, those of us who were against war and against sanctions would say, this is not, number one, these kinds of attacks will strengthen the regime. We saw with sanctions that it did, but we said war would also strengthen them. And that change comes from the internal dynamics. Change comes from when you have a stronger middle class and when you open the doors, because Iran is an aspirational society. Okay, so we got attacked. I would get attacked of being, you're a regime supporter.
An apologist for the regime.
You're an apologist. You're all sorts of things. And of course, from the other side, I would get, you're an agent of, I don't know which agency, whichever it is.
CIA,
right? So, which acronym letter. That's right. But the argument that we always made, and I saw with my own eyes when I was working on Syria and Libya, was that there is no interest on the part of three countries. I wrote about this in, I think, 2018. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Israel, to have legitimate, democratic, open states that are functioning in the region. Because if Iraq had become, what it could have been, Iraq is a small country, it was educated, it's wealthy, etc., they would have stood up to Israeli occupation of Palestine.
Correct.
They would have pushed back on Wahhabism from the Saudis, and they would have challenged the UAE's economic dominance in the region. Iraq is on its knees, those three benefits. Same with Libya. It's on its knees. And Iran has been the one that's been standing. And again, it's understanding that the agenda is the destruction of the country, not just the regime. And it's wanting a pliant kind of, kiss the ring type of a leadership there.
Correct.
That's all they
are never going to get from any Iranian.
Well, we have one guy who keeps saying I'll do it, but we don't want him.
Yes.
But it's for Iranians to see that what we were saying sadly has come to pass, right? That the destruction of schools and hospitals and bridges and so forth. So that's one thing. The other thing, which has been it hasn't received the attention that it really deserves, is that every war that the U.S. fights, they test new weapons. We know that. In Iran, they've tested AI as an integral part of its attack strategies. That's why they were able to do 1,000 targets a day for 30 days in a row. Because there is there's the data, and that there's no human assessment of, is this right? Is that a school? And there's no conversation about the implications of this, about what the U.S. is learning or not learning, about how they assess this. I was speaking to a journalist about the Maven project, which is part of this thing of bringing Google into the Pentagon. And she said that in 2021, it was AI that identified the target of a compound in Afghanistan, saying, oh, these are Taliban and they're white cars and so forth. It turned out to be an aid worker with his children. And then it turned out that the AI algorithms didn't identify children. They didn't see the children.
Right, because they were too small and they had
no, they were just not programmed.
Whatever.
Yeah,
they were not programmed in.
They were just not programmed in, right? They were programmed in to see the white cars, but not.
Yeah.
And when the programmers had gone back to the Pentagon at the time to say, well, we can change that so that children are identified, at the time, the Pentagon had said, no need. It doesn't matter, right? So I'm curious, 5 years on, 6 years on, do they identify children? Are children now being identified for the purpose of actually targeting them, as we saw in Gaza, in Israel, right? So
yeah, and what we've heard from the UN report on, what actually happened to children and how they were directly targeted. Exactly. We don't know.
It's this other horrific Pandora's box that's been opened, and this time it's on Iran, and it breaks my heart many times.
How are you feeling about where we're at? Because it is really an interesting thing, because I think if anything, the rest of the world, and it's interesting that you mentioned the 3 countries in the region that don't want to see this be resolved. But I think for much of the rest of the world, Sanam, it has also given the world some hope that the asymmetry in power relations within what is called the so-called global international rules-based order has been so revealed to be an order that disproportionately favors one particular group of nations over others, and the double standards that have been revealed. But Iran standing up, and this is kind of the dilemma for us as feminists, as people who are democratic, who want to see a more open, tolerant, joyous regime, is that by the sheer fact of resisting this huge military empire with all its weapons, with all its might, with all its resources, to fight back in no less an asymmetrical way than we experience with the Vietnam War or the Algerians fighting the French.
When this war started, my proposition, as I told many people, was that it's a lose-lose proposition for all sides. Iran has paid an inordinate cost in human lives and infrastructure and in history and economically going forward, environmentally going forward. The US has lost standing in the world. It has proven the limitations of this massive military identity, right? I call it dumb defense. It's dumb because it's these hulking, great big, aircraft carriers and these very expensive, defense missiles that are meant to go up. And the Iranians are hitting them with $20,000.
Neighboring countries. That is especially the dumb part, where they didn't think that they would need to protect the UAE or the Saudis or the Jordanians or anybody else in the region, because all they cared about was protecting Israel.
And that's also revealed itself, right? It's a lose-lose for the Gulf states as well. Israel, I'm not quite sure, because I think that they've
basically been given cover for their continued assault on both the territories of other nations as well as their continued violence against Palestinians inside both Gaza and the West Bank. Yeah. I mean, the world is not paying attention because there's a war going on.
And they're burning. It's burning, right? And the MOU, as I've said before, that when they signed it, it was the best option, better than carry on. We didn't invest in the building blocks and putting in the systems and monitoring and committees and whatever, and also the world rallying around it to say to Trump, this is good, well done, carry on in this direction. This is, this is the right thing to do. It was everybody was saying, oh, it's a bad MOU. I'm like, better than the other option, right? Like you work with what you have. Then they bombed again and everything escalated. And now we have this pause. But it's really scary.
It's very scary.
It's July 27th. So I'm going to give a date just for the recording of this. Because what's happening is that Yemen, I was just talking to one of my Yemeni partners, and she was saying Yemen is getting ready for a massive reignition of the war
there.
With the Houthis and the government and the Saudis and so forth. So they're waiting. The Iranians, basically, their approach has been that, okay, if the U.S. hits, they retaliate. Okay, so now there's a pause. But if you listen to the naval analysts and the military analysts, people will often say, well, the pause is often the moment for rebooting. Yeah. The mass of humanity that is being transported to the region.
Militarily, yeah.
And then you bring it to August. And August, it's the month that usually I have my family break, and we're kind of in our little village. We go to this little village and we pretend that it's like a sort of little magical moment of family break. But every time we turn on the television or our phones, August is often the moment when a lot of terrible things happen. The Israelis
and they do it on purpose because they think people's minds are distracted and the world.
The West is on holiday.
The West is on holiday, exactly. Exactly.
You know, Afghanistan, the Taliban took over in the middle of August, you know. So it's, I'm kind of taking this moment with huge trepidation because I don't trust what is coming from the US and the Israeli side. I think that the Iranians, I mean, from what we're hearing from the Iranian government, they get this. They are also like preparing. But what drives me insane is that, again, it's literally a bunch of men who are sending other people's kids. I mean, the Iranians actually, to their credit, will say things like, we know that our own lives are at risk, and of course they've seen their own friends and colleagues die. But still, it's putting other people's children at risk. It's, you know, if they have places to go and shelter, what is it for the ordinary public? Where are the shelters for the public?
And all of those children were once as little and as defenseless and as beautiful as our little Parker Qatari.
Yeah. And since Parker was born, there are so many more. I mean, he's already older than...
He's already old. He's a week old.
He's a week old, and there's a whole other week of babies that have come. And you know, it just goes back to what I've done for 30 years. I'm like, if there were a bunch of women sitting around the table, would it be like this? Would we look at the world and plan and execute killing with such ease? What is it about these men?
I mean, I think of the wonderful call of Julia Ward Howe, who is the founder of what is now celebrated as Mother's Day. But what we forget is her proclamation, the Mother's Day proclamation, in which she says, disarm, disarm, you know. I call to the mothers of this earth. And that was her rallying cry. And really, I think it's not surprising that we've had women at the forefront of peace building and efforts to try and bring an end to wars.
The work I've done over the last 30 years on getting Resolution 1325 at the Security Council that says women should be at the peace table. When you trace its trajectory, it goes back to the League of Nations when women, again, from South America and other parts of the world were saying, we want to be at those tables where you guys are making these decisions. Yeah. We want a seat at that damn table. And that table is moving. It morphs, because the minute women move into those spaces, that power goes to another room and goes somewhere else. And that's what I look at the world and I'm thinking, now it's in the space of the trillionaires and the billionaires and those guys. But
so every time you basically are allowed to come to one table, then they move they actually move the seat of decision making away from that table to a completely different one. And it is interesting, because I was just thinking, here am I working for an organization, IPPF, that looks at questions of how we bring life onto the planet. And here are you trying to say, and once we have that life on the planet, can we please do everything in our power to preserve, to protect, and to celebrate that life? Because without a commitment to peace that is based in justice, we won't have that. And there's something kind of quite fitting about this circle, isn't it? It is one that women understand, as you said, because our own lives are put at risk every time we bring new life. So
thank you for being with me every couple of weeks and for hanging out. It's been really fun.
I have loved it, and I felt so honored because, you know, we had Soleil as the first co-host, your wonderful daughter, and I thought that it was just a continuation of a friendship that I felt so lucky to develop with you through the Bosch
exactly. The
Academy
fellows.
And the fellowship at the Richard von Weizsäcker Fellowship. So I think it's been so much fun, and I'm so grateful. And I think
grateful for having you as a co-host. When you said you could do it, I was like, oh yay, this is like getting the job, aiming for the moon and getting it. So.
And I think we both have been so fortunate to work with, and in your case, create organizations that really do represent this striving that you were talking about, you know, this striving for a better world, this dreaming, this imagination, this radical imagination.
And just getting on, like Rumi says.
And just doing it, you know.
You know, take a step and the path appears. And I'm like, it's so true. You just take one step and then another step, and it just it just creates, it's amazing. You don't realize what you're doing.
So I feel like from the International Planned Parenthood Federation, where I work now, to ICANN, which you founded, to the Global Fund for Women, where I worked for 14 years and had the privilege of supporting women's rights groups all over the world. I just feel like in a world where we are constantly besieged with news about what's not going right, I feel like this has been, every week when we talk to one of these people, it's just a reminder, in the way that I remember proposals coming to the Global Fund used to be a reminder to me of all the good that is happening in the world, of all the courage that is being shown, of all the passion that people are pouring into.
And how good they are.
And how good they are.
Decency there is, what
Yes.
just goodness there is. And
because I think it's easy for us to feel depleted and despairing when we look at the people who are in the headlines, because, the Erdogans and the Trumps and the
Modis.
The Modis.
Oh my. Talk about the cockroach.
Oh, we do.
Yes,
so, that's what I'm saying. I think that when you look at those young people, they in a way are no different than the many people we got to talk to, right? Stephanie from Jewish Voices for Peace, they're in the middle of a genocide, is an extraordinary young Jewish woman who says, not in my name, not on my watch, not in any way are you going to claim that what you stand for as a genocidal state in any way represents Judaism or the perspective of Jewish people around the world. So I do think that we've been lucky, Sanam, and I'm so glad you gave me this chance. It's
Thank you.
So much fun.
It's been so much fun, and it's been so.
Plus, it's been like having tea with you in your
exactly
apartment in London.
We get to hang out, I hope that we will carry on into the new season in September with some other guests and carrying on building. It's becoming like a little portfolio of extraordinary people, right? It's just wonderful.
Yes, it's our little bouquet of the most delicious smelling roses we can have. The best. In the worst of times, yeah.
Yeah, truly.
But, speaking of best of, Pierce, our wonderful colleague who makes this happen and produces these wonderful shows, much love to you and the family. Hope you do get some time in a little bit of a escape from the world around us. And may there not be war this August.
May sanity and decency prevail. Yeah, and enjoy the babies. Keep sending us pictures. And we'll be back on air hopefully in September. We'll announce our new
lineup.
Yeah, exactly. Lineup.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Big hug and lots of love.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. This was If You Were in Charge, a podcast brought to you by ICANN, the International Civil Society Action Network. Get in touch and tell us what you think at info@icannpeacework.org and follow our newsletter. Like and subscribe, and please tell everybody else who might like the show. My thanks to ADA Productions for making the show possible, to Little Monster Media for our music, and of course to my amazing co-host, Kavita Nandini Ramdas. And finally, to all of you for listening. We'll be back soon. Thank you.